Hey guys, this is David Peck, better known as DPEC100, live here from Orlando, Florida. And I just got this really cool item in the mail today. I'm always on the hunt for new items from old school wrestling, if you will, and especially items that are associated with the Wrestling All-Stars cards. One of the things I like to do is collect the magazines of the Wrestling News or any of the programs that Norman Kites are made for the various territories that feature the photos. And so anyway, I came across, this is a calendar. It's for 1984 Mid-South. And as you can see, they used the format of the Wrestling All-Stars cards and just posted the photos in them. And one of the things I think would be so great about this item is you could cut it up, get them signed, have them slabbed in a PSA holder. You know, there's a hot topic right now on the PSA message board where people are sort of debating the idea that PSA lately has been grading some paper cutouts. And I tell you what, if that trend continues, boy, this would be a cool item for that. So as you can see, this isn't in the best condition as you see the spine there. But anyway, here we have first, this is January. We've got Magnum TA. This is a shot from 1983. In '83, Magnum TA was really coming along in professional wrestling. Ernie Ladd was the booker, and he brought Terry Allen in from the Florida territory for where he was working for Eddie Graham. And so at this time, he was sort of a protege of Mr. Wrestling 2, doing some training, and they went on to feud. Unfortunately, in 1986, really when Magnum TA's career was really starting to go sky high. He got into a terrible auto accident. He spun out of control in his Porsche turbo convertible, and unfortunately that ended his career instantly. So next we have Hacksaw Jim Duggan. This is a cool shot with the steel chair over his shoulder. Went on later to be used in the 2x4. That was sort of his signature item. Hacksaw's featured in the 1983 Wrestling All-Stars set, and he was one of the largest stars in the Mid-South territory. A big body, really got the crowd going, really catapulted him onto the wrestling scene. And, you know, Hacksaw is still associated with the business today. I've seen some great footage online. Matter of fact, I just recently got the new DVD that the WWE made on Mid-South, and there's some really good footage of Duggan in many classic bouts in Mid-South. We're moving to February. First, we have Hacksaw Butch Reed. Now, take a look at the physique on this guy. Totally put together. Was a football player, played for the Kansas City Chiefs, I believe. Was a really big star in the Mid-South in the early 80s. Later in the 80s, went on probably to the pinnacle of success of his career to tag team with Ron Simmons as Doom. But as you can see, this guy was just put together. A total athlete, very, very strong, and a great wrestler. Really had a great career. Next, we're moving on to the Junkyard Dog. Now, the Junkyard Dog is arguably the greatest star ever to come out of the Mid-South. Cowboy Bill Watts at the time capitalized on a really large black audience in Louisiana. It was very uncommon for black wrestlers to really get the same kind of push as their white counterparts. But Cowboy Bill Watts saw the potential. As you can see, Junkyard Dog was really put together. Boy, I'll tell you what, he came out to that music. And if you see some of the footage from, you know, some of the shows of 20,000+ people, they were just going wild for the Junkyard Dog. He's featured in the 1982 Wrestling All-Stars Series A. And actually, it's one of my favorite cards. When I first submitted cards to PSA, one of the cards I sent in was a beautiful Junkyard Dog. Came back a PSA 10, still the only PSA 10 of that card, and a great shot of one of the legends of 80s wrestling. Next, we move to March. First, we have Mr. Wrestling. Not really sure who this guy is. As you can see, not really well built. Probably was a jobber at the time. But anyway, there's 24 wrestlers featured, and he's one of them. Next, we have Mr. Wrestling 2. And as you'll see, this photo looks very familiar to those who collect the Wrestling All-Stars cards. This is the same shot that's used on his card that's featured in the 1982 Series B. And Mr. Wrestling 2 is kind of special to me from the standpoint, I grew up here in Orlando, and my dad used to go to the matches at the Eddie Graham Sports Stadium, and they would sit up close, and he always used to tell us a story about the night that Buddy Colt broke the arm of Johnny Walker. He used to wrestle as Johnny Walker, but I can't even imagine what it's like to see a guy get hurled into the ring post and see his arm snap in half, but they witnessed it, and it certainly made them question whether or not wrestling was real or fake at the time. Moving to April. My birthday is April 1st. There it is right there. First, we have Mil Mascaras, and this is a great shot of Mil Mascaras. I actually have a wrestling news magazine from 1977 or 1978 with this same photo. This is the photo used for his 1982 Wrestling All-Stars card. So far, there's only one that's graded mint by PSA. I actually bought that a few years ago, really before the cards had gone up in value, and paid a lot for it at the time, but it's still a pop one, so that's a cool card for sure, no 10s. But Mil Mascaras is by far one of the most popular wrestlers ever. Was huge in Japan, was a movie star in Mexico. As you can see, he was extremely well built, awesome in-ring performer, acrobatics, you name it. Wears the mask. An interesting note, my understanding is that, you know, he's a tough autograph because he does not like to travel without the mask on. He still believes in kayfabe, and with the change in air traffic laws in this country, I guess it's really difficult for him to travel. Next, we move to Chavo Guerrero. The Guerrero family is one of the more famous families of wrestling. Chavo Jr. is a current wrestler, as many know, and Eddie Guerrero went on to be probably the most famous of the Guerreros. But anyway, here's a shot of Chavo Guerrero. You know, here again, the Guerrero family, just a huge, long-term family in wrestling. We're moving to May. First, we have Cowboy Bill Watts. This is a nice shot of Cowboy Bill Watts. Many know that he was the owner of the territory at the time. Bill Watts was a big star in the late 60s and all throughout the 70s. He's in the 1982 Wrestling All-Star set, one of the white cards, which I've never really gotten very good at grading those myself raw. They're very difficult to gauge the condition. He's one of the tougher cards. He's in the back. And anyway, you know, Bill Watts is sort of a controversial figure in wrestling. A lot of people remember him from his days as WCW. A lot of the wrestlers don't particularly care for him, but clearly one of the legendary promoters, Bill Watts. Next, we have Steve Dr. Death Williams. Now, I was really surprised when I first flipped through this to see him. I did not realize that he was in wrestling in '83. As you can see there with a football jersey, he was very famous for his heroics in football. And one of the tougher guys in wrestling. I mean, this guy was really put together in a real fight. My understanding is he's one of the last guys you would have ever wanted to have to be in a fight with. You know, UFC's become super popular in recent years, and I gotta believe that in the early days of UFC, that where guys weren't necessarily as trained in all the various jiu-jitsus and different types of martial arts, that he could have participated and certainly been a force to reckon with. Unfortunately, he passed away a few years ago, but was really popular wrestler. Was one of the UFW stars that actually, when the UWF and Jim Crockett Promotions, they purchased that territory, he actually came over and was one of the few stars that actually went on to be a big star in the WCW. Just a great performer, very popular, Dr. Death Steve Williams. Next, we have Johnny Rich. Now, wasn't really certain who this guy was, so I looked him up. It turns out he's Tommy Rich's cousin. As you can see here by this guy's look, really didn't have it. Most likely was a jobber at the time. But one of the guys featured in the calendar. Next, we have Tommy Wildfire Rich. Now, this guy was really big in the NWA, especially in Georgia Championship Wrestling. Actually held the NWA title, I want to say 1980 or maybe 1981. Very brief stint. Never really recaptured that glory, if you will. There are wrestling shows promoted on the independent scene here in Orlando, and I can remember about a year ago getting an advertisement on my car for a show that was up the street at the Fern Creek Armory, where I attend shows from time to time. And so, it's possible I may see him resurface at some time. But anyway, he's in the 1982 Wrestling All-Stars Series A. One of the tougher cards, has a lot of surface issues. And here he looks pretty good. And Tommy Wildfire Rich. We're moving to July. Now, this is a great shot. I was really excited when I was flipping through this to see this. I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer, and it's become very clear what this picture is. This is the photo that's used for Dusty Rhodes' 1982 Wrestling All-Stars card. And I have a copy of one of the magazines from 1981. I believe that's the year this photo came from. As you can see, he's wearing the legendary NWA Championship belt there. Dusty Rhodes was a multi-time champion. Being from Orlando, he was huge here in the 70s. So all growing up, when he was working the Florida territory and we'd watch it on local television, I was sort of had no choice but to like Dusty Rhodes because he was one of the good guys for sure. Next we have Dick Murdoch. This looks like him when he was Captain Redneck. Dick Murdoch and Dusty Rhodes were a famous tag team in the AWA, the early 70s. One of the tougher guys in wrestling. What's interesting about Dick Murdoch is there's lots of rumors that he was involved in the KKK. Obviously, in the 70s and early 80s, that probably was somewhat accepted in wrestling circles, but clearly wouldn't be today. He's in the 1982 Wrestling All-Stars Series A, and one of the tougher cards. I got fortunate when I bought out a fellow collector a couple years ago. It got thrown in on the deal, and I didn't realize at the time how tough that card was going to be. Moving right along, this is potentially one of the coolest shots in the entire calendar, King Kong Bundy. And King Kong Bundy really became a big star in the WWF. Probably the pinnacle of his career was WrestleMania 2 against Hulk Hogan. I can remember him and Big John Studd teaming up and double teaming Hogan, and naturally being a young kid at the time, we were huge Hulk Hogan fans, and I was really scared of this guy. But he's still very active on the wrestling circuit at the conventions, and I got to think this would potentially be one of the coolest items to get signed and put in a slab. Great shot of King Kong Bundy. Next we have Kimala. Now, just a few years later, he took over the name Kamala, the Ugandan giant, and really never looked back. But when he first was brought into wrestling, he was Kimala, Ugandan warrior. And his best card is in the 1986 Carnation set. And it's a really neat card. What I love so much about those cards is on the back, they've got some sort of interesting descriptions. And one of the things that they say about Kamala is he ate live chickens. Well, as you can see here, it's a great gimmick. He was a powerhouse, a very big man. I've read that he was terrible in the ring, but was very believable because of his size. Unfortunately, in recent years, he's come under some health concerns, and actually just recently had his leg amputated, perhaps in the last year or two. Moving right along, next we have Tim Horner. Did a little research on this guy, and he tagged with Brad Armstrong. As you can see here, doesn't have a very good look, and that's maybe probably a jobber at the time. Next we have Ted DiBiase, and Ted DiBiase was arguably one of the best stars in the Mid-South territory. He's here with his black glove. He had sort of a knockout punch. He's in the 1982 Wrestling All-Star set, Series A. It's actually a photo from 1978 or 79, and there's a great clip, Hulk Hogan's debut match, in Madison Square Garden is against Ted DiBiase, and he makes pretty quick work of him. But anyway, Ted DiBiase was very faithful to Bill Watts in the Mid-South Territory in 1986 and 87 when the UWF merged with Jim Crockett Promotions. DiBiase went ahead and went a different direction and went to the WWF and debuted as the $1 Million Man, one of the great gimmicks of wrestling. Ted DiBiase, one of the better in-ring wrestlers of all time. This right here is a really great shot. Skandor Akbar, one of the legendary wrestling managers. As you can see, he's got a few guys with him. It looks to me like that is the one-man gang over to the right. And that's obviously Killer Khan to the left. Killer Khan's actually in the 1982 Wrestling All-Stars Series B. One of the tougher cards. Always seems to come off cut, but I love this shot. Very cool item. Unfortunately, Skandor Akbar passed away not too long ago. Next, we have Mr. Olympia. And those that collect the Wrestling All-Stars will notice this is a very familiar photo. He's featured in the 1983 Wrestling All-Stars, one of the tougher cards, got a lot of surface issues. And one of the things that happened was Norman Keitzer was very cost-conscious. Just a few weeks ago, I was actually on the phone with Jim Cornette, the famous wrestling manager. We were talking about he took a lot of the photos of the guys from the Memphis Wrestling, Jerry Lawler, Bill Dundee, and so forth. And so anyway, apparently it was very expensive at the time to do print. And Norman Keitzer, once he had a photo of somebody, he tried to use it as much as he could. And that's why you will see the same photos used in numerous publications that he put out. I mean, I've seen some that are 10 years old that don't even resemble somebody at the time. So here's Mr. Olympia. Next, we have Freebird Buddy Roberts. Now, this is a great page because the Fabulous Freebirds, one of the great tag teams of all time, have made a huge impact in WCCW of Texas. Right next to it, you see Terry Gordy and Michael Hayes holding some tag team championships here. A great shot of these two. I just was on Terry Gordy's Wikipedia page the other day, and turns out he got his start in wrestling at age 14. Unfortunately, he died at age 40, but these two teamed up in 1979 and really were very, very close guys, never really strayed too much apart. Michael Hayes, another great performer. He's actually still involved with wrestling and one of the great wrestling minds. A great shot of the legendary Fabulous Freebirds. Next, we have Ernie Ladd. And those that collect the wrestling cards will recognize this shot. This is indeed the photo used for his 1982 Wrestling All-Stars Series A card. Ernie Ladd was a great NFL player. Really instrumental behind the scenes in wrestling, was a booker. He was the booker at the time for the Mid-South Territory. This particular card is really tough, no tens. A lot of people don't realize just how important this guy was and how much he really paved the way for many of the African-American stars of wrestling. Next, we have Andre the Giant. Now, this particular shot was used in numerous wrestling news publications, on the cover of quite a few, obviously. He is featured in the 1982 Wrestling All-Star Series A. The Andre card is the top card in the sealed set, as most know. Is very condition sensitive. My PSA 9 is really one of my best cards, and I really tried with everything I had to get one in a PSA 9 holder. I struck out with all the BGS cards I bought, and at this time, the PSA 9 is the most expensive card I've ever purchased. Last page, here we have Boyd Pierce. He was one of the color commentators, and this is a great shot because you will see to the right, this is actually Paul Ellering. Paul Ellering was a great wrestler, was a power lifter. As you can see, has a tremendous physique, loads of potential, ended up with an injury that was career-ending. And fortunately for him, went on to be the manager of the Road Warriors, perhaps the greatest tag team of all time. And this guy was really a fascinating character in wrestling because he in the 80s and 90s was used to carry around the Wall Street Journal with him to the ringside, but that wasn't an act. This guy was apparently a commodities trader, and he did all the booking and so forth for Animal and Hawk, and could go down as one of the top wrestling managers of all time. Final guy is Grizzly Smith, and did a little research on him, and he's a wrestler all the way back to the 50s. Apparently was about 6'8", 350 pounds. As you can see here, he looks pretty big in the photo. I've got to assume this photo is from somewhere around the 1960s. So there you have it. One of the coolest items I've ever come across. I certainly plan to try to locate more of these. Anything that from the Wrestling All-Stars and Wrestling News that has a connection to the cards, as I said before, I'm always on the hunt for, and very excited to add this to my collection. Have a great night. Thanks for checking out my video.